And what he's talking about in Canada rings very true for myself as well. Where my mother lives, it's a valley of 250,000. There's one dermatologist. And there's a lot of seniors there. It's a retirement area. When she went on maternity leave, which, by the way, in Canada, you get 1 year of maternity leave for both spouses, okay? So she went on maternity leave for a year. There were no dermatologists within a 3-hour drive. Seniors were seeing veterinarians, you know, for skin creams and stuff like that. And in Canada, many of the veterinarians are better than the physicians because they get paid a whole lot more, and that's where really the smart people went, you know? They said, I don't want to deal with government medicine. The fallacy about government medicine in Canada is that universal health care in Canada is impossible. It's impossible. Because what it tries to do is give everybody the same amount of care. My mother's friend was diagnosed at 84, at age 78 with breast cancer, stage 4. You know, and they basically told her, you're going to check in but not check out. She'd been going to the doctor, you know, with a rash on her chest, and on her, you know, she'd been going for 2 or 3 years, and they kept saying, oh, it's poison ivy, it's a spider bite, you know, go away. Finally, my mother dragged her into emergency, and they said, you know, you're going to check in, but you're not going to check out. So, you know, put your affairs in order. One of her friends who goes to the liquor store every day and buys 2 cans of beer, because if she buys more, she'll drink them, so she goes religiously. The clerks know her so well, and she was looking really sad, and they said, Ona, you know, what's wrong? And she said, well, my friend was just diagnosed with breast cancer, and she's going to die, and she's only 78, and I'm 84. Somebody in that lineup, 3 people behind her, said, lady, if you're 84, you ought to be dead instead of costing the rest of us money. Wow. Can you believe that? I mean, if I would have been there, bang, you know. Yeah. But that is socialism. Everybody presumes they're entitled to the same amount of care. The 23-year-old athlete should get the same medical care as the 68-year-old, you know, diabetic. That's what they think. And they don't think it's fair when somebody else gets more. Well, why is he getting more? Well, because he needs more. Well, yeah, but I'm entitled. It's, you know, universal, so it doesn't work. We're going to open up for about 15 minutes for questions from the speakers from the first half.
While we wait for questions, can I just say one thing about how important your voice is? The morning that the Supreme Court argument started, on March the 26th, I had a TV interview that morning, and I thought, I'm just going to go by the Supreme Court and see what's going on. The left was unbelievably organized. You want to know community organizers? These people had it. They had a place across the street. They had a press office. They had press credentials. They had a podium. They had microphone. They had demonstrators. They had posters. Our side had nothing. Americans, well, a few people. But that first day, most Americans for Prosperity were 6 blocks away, and they thought, oh, it'll be fine. You know, we'll still get the media coverage. I said, no, there were 40 television cameras there, and we had nobody. And I made some phone calls that afternoon, and it was the Tea Party that came through. The next day, absolutely at least equal. And the pictures were inspiring with flags and people, passionate, hand-lettered posters. Microphone, podium, speaker, agenda, members were coming from across the street. And the third day, we outnumbered them. Pulled it together in no time. And it showed me that the passion is what really counts. And we may need that again if the Supreme Court upholds all are part of this law. Because we have to make sure the American people understand how passionate we are. Thank you very much for coming. You were very much outnumbered, though, that first day. But the second day, everybody came through.
My question is to the Canadians. How many Canadians were dying in the streets in 1983 before they switched or changed the health care?
How many were dying in the streets?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the history on the whole thing is that the individual provinces have been experimenting with basically socialized health care. And in 1984, the whole thing was sort of unified under the Canada Health Act. But, you know, before government health care, both the United States and Canada, I mean, if there was a patient in need, it was just part of medical ethics that doctors just took care of those patients. And that's how it was dealt with. And to be honest with you, I've seen far more denial of care in Canada
Right.
of patients than I've ever seen here in the United States. I really haven't seen any, to be honest with you. I'm sure it happens, but it was very blatant up in Canada. I mean, where people just languishing, you know, on these waiting lists.
If you're Canadian and you're uninsured, if you're uninsured in Canada, you can't get care. You will be turned away at emergency, okay? If you're covered, fine, you might have to wait 48 hours, but you'll get into emergency. But if you're uninsured in Canada, you can't get care. Dr. Watson?
Just adding to what Grace Marie Turner said, the Catholics, through the bishops, have said that they're going to have demonstrations the last week of June and the first week of July.
Good.
I'm not a Catholic, but I'm sure going to be joining the Catholics in Wichita, Kansas, as they demonstrate against this terrible law.
Excellent, thank you.
I think it's a mistake to focus on only lack of privacy regarding electronic medical records. Electronic medical records are absolutely no good. As far as I'm concerned, they're garbage because just they're forms that are filled out and they have meaningless repetition, and real consult letters are meaningful and they're good. Electronic records are no good at all.
Phone calls are also helpful in addition to the handwritten things you're talking about. Interesting story, one of my patients went to one of the Ready Care Centers that was actually started by a hospital that I'm on the staff of, and they said it wasn't to compete with me, it was to help me, but they were open the same hours, so I didn't know how that was helpful. But at any rate, the patient went in for a bronchitis. It was on a Sunday, and I happened to be closed on Sunday. I'm open the other 6 days of the week, but you know, we're closed on Sunday, as it happens. So went in and got checked out for bronchitis, and I got faxed what you were talking about, a 3-page report on the bronchitis and things. They went through a review of systems like you'd find in Bates examination. Right. It was unbelievable. Right. It was impossible that in the time period they spent, that could have all been done. And I actually asked the patient, did they do a breast exam on you? Because it says here that for your bronchitis, they did a gynecological breast exam on you, and it was normal. Did they do that? Do I need to call the medical board or something foul here? No, they didn't do that. So obviously, there's a lot of errors, a lot of omissions, but even more than the omissions, there's much more there than actually happens. You know, point and click, point and click, point and click, point and click. You know, I found with electronic prescribing, we did it for actually the last 5 years, experimenting with it because we know it's something that's coming and is going to be forced upon us. And I found that in 1 year of electronic prescribing, we had more errors than in 3 years of paper prescriptions actually, and being called, Doc, I didn't understand this. Did you leave something off? What did you mean by this? But with electronic prescriptions, it's easy. Oh, I double-clicked. How do I get it back? And it goes into cyberspace through 17 channels and winds up where it's going. There's lots of duplication of prescriptions, and I can't wait. The government has their heart set on prescribing narcotics electronically. Narcotics electronically. So right now, I'm writing everything, I'm making copies of everything, I have paper charts, I have everything backed up. We can be totally responsible. I have communications in analog form with all of the pharmacists who know me and my style and how protective I am of patients' rights, but also of my right to practice. But the government is getting ready to launch seminars to teach us how to electronically prescribe narcotics. Just imagine, you know, you want OxyContin? No problem. We'll deliver it to you in your home.
Government medicine combines the efficiency of the post office with the compassion of the IRS.
Nice.
Go ahead.
Okay, regarding malpractice, there have been some very good points about how the liability and the judgments and so on are very high. I want to point out that the malpractice, the professional liability insurers are, I think, in on the organized medicine scam, racketeering, whatever you want. And the one fact that makes it completely irrefutable is that EDTA chelation, whatever your opinion about it, if it's good medicine, if it isn't, setting that aside, chelation physicians do not get sued. It is an extremely rare occurrence, but if a doctor does chelation, the rates go up, not down. Why? it's not because of liability payments. There's something else going on, and we need to look at it.
Well, we certainly can't argue with the fact that there's a lot going on out there that we don't know about. It's long been claimed by mostly trial lawyers that the main reason that liability premiums were high was because the insurance companies were overcharging the doctors. I suspect that there's a little bit of that going on, and and that it all works together to raise the premiums. Because tort reform has worked. Rates have come down in Texas since they passed their tort reform in 2003. Rates have come down 26%. So, and they, I believe, have 24,000 and some new physicians in Texas. So the tort reform has worked, but why haven't the premiums gone down to the same level that they were at before the liability crisis? So you may have a very good point.
I just wanted to point out an interesting point which occurred in an emergency room in which I had a patient, and the doctor in the next bed seeing his patient had his own computer with him, and he had his electronic medical records, and he was checking everything off electronically, was finished much earlier than I. The problem was when he was checking the extremities, he put all the pulses were intact, everything was there, he put the color of the skin and so forth. The only problem was that it was a bilateral amputee.
Absolutely, that goes back to the breast exam that wasn't.
I just want to ask you, do you know anything about Press Ganey and what is the plan? They will drop the payment to the doctors and hospitals according to Press Ganey scores?
I haven't heard about that.
I have heard that.
Yeah,
Have you?
yeah,
I have heard
it's a
that.
company that comes into hospitals and it tells you how to improve, not your patient care, but your patient's impression of the care. And I know that unfortunately, the hospitals are paying major credence to this. As a physician with staff privileges at 3 hospitals, there's a few of the hospitals that pay really large attention to the Press Ganey scores. I don't know the details of it because I've tried to keep my head out of it. I want to be involved in good medicine and practice the way I need to practice, but it's becoming increasingly harder when it's becoming kind of a, it's like politics. It's a publicity contest. It's not a contest of substance.
The government has sent out about 40,000 letters to physicians in 4 Midwestern states. I'm sure you've heard about that too. Just to tell them that we're going to be watching to make sure that your charges don't get out of line in treatment of this patient, particular patient. Patient may see 13 different patients or doctors. Doctors don't know who the other doctors this patient is seeing, and yet they could be penalized if some of those other doctors in a non-network wind up having a higher cost per patient in that community. It's coming. It's a test model. I'll send you the Washington Post story about it, but it's frightening. And it just came as an email, dropped into these physicians' email boxes. We're now watching to see whether or not you're overprescribing and overtreating these patients.
Dr. Wax, if I came to you and I paid cash to see you,
Yes, ma'am.
and I'm very interested in the privacy aspects of visiting someone like you, what
Thank you.
happens when I go to the hospital? Do I lose all of that privacy?
Well, here's the thing. Even with HIPAA does state that for, quote, continuity of care, we can communicate with other healthcare professionals. So although technically you can, everybody in the entire healthcare community, lock, stock, and barrel, is afraid to go up against the government. So what I can tell you is I could take care of you in the hospital or have other physicians and specialties that are appropriate to your care for you in a confidential way. The difficulty is if they use some of those systems, there may be some potential compromise. So, I can only vouch for my corner of the world, and I'm trying to expand that corner, or at least help other people to value the same values. And that's kind of why I've been such an active member with AAPS, because it seems to be the one organization that's going pro-patient, pro-physician,
Two more questions.
con government, con insurance, con all third parties. In fact, to that point, I had the privilege of interviewing the executive director, Dr. Jane Orient, on my radio show, Your Health Matters, only on Rowan Radio, 89.7 WGLS FM. You have to say it that way or you kind of get fired. So it's
it like a DJ.
yeah, it's a free position, so I kind of have to stick with it. But I had the privilege of enjoying the interview of Dr. Orient, and one of the things that she made clear, which was so clarion call and important, she didn't say the doctor-patient relationship or the physician-patient relationship. She called it the patient-physician relationship, because the patient is who this is all about. It is by, for, and about the patient, kind of like what the government started out to do for all of us. You know, it was supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people, and now it's not even run by people, it seems like. I mean, forgive me if anybody's involved in government, working very hard at trying to change things. But if you get a chance to tune in, and you can Google it, it's called Your Health Matters, and it's on Rowan Radio. It would be a great opportunity for you to listen to what healthcare should be. Again, Dr. Jane Orient on my radio show. In fact, I think it's on the AAPS YouTube channel.
Thank you. We have,
Sure. I'd like to just add to that quickly. It's becoming increasingly difficult to go to a hospital and be seen by an independent physician, such as Craig. Typically, if you go to a hospital today, you're going to be seen by an employee of that hospital. And the employee of that hospital does what the hospital wants. Well, not just hospitals, but all specialties are increasingly being employed and controlled by the hospital. So it's getting to be almost impossible to go to a hospital and get an independent opinion about whether you should even be at the hospital. Instead, you're going to get a hospital opinion, and that's something we got to fight, and APS is fighting that, and we're going to be suing a hospital in New Jersey.
okay, we have time for one more question. Dr. Schiller?
I was just wondering where you see us nationally in the setup of the accountable care organizations. You know, where are we along that process, and how's that? What's going to happen whether Obamacare is, repealed or not? Well, thrown out.
Well, there are the Obamacare of accountable care organizations, and there are a lot of other private accountable care organizations trying to deliver more efficient, coordinated care. Those are actually flourishing. But the ones that Obamacare, I mean, with these mountains of rules and regulations, they're having a very hard time getting anyone to play and participate with absolutely no guarantee that there's going to be any return or any profit. So I think that we just held a conference on the value of innovation in medicine. That's going to continue, but it's got to be driven from the bottom up, not from this top-down centralized system.
And I'll comment on that too. I'm getting about 10 calls a week now from physicians that are being approached by ACOs, United Health, and all the rest, wanting to buy them out. And buy them out is not really an accurate word. Steal them is more accurate. What's my practice worth? And a practice that relies on third-party payer patients, you don't own the patient flow. Mark, I know you have a private cash practice. You own your patient flow. They come to you for you. If you're getting a lot of your patients from third-party payers, when you retire, they just send them to the other doctor. You don't own that. So there's a lot less goodwill in that. And it affects your value of your practice. And there's tax implications on that. As a matter of fact, we're having a webinar on June 12th at 7:30 p.m. Central, right about that, practice valuation and the tax consequences of that. So we're going to pause now. We're going to shorten the break a little bit because we ran a little bit over, 10-minute break. Right after the break, Murray Sabrin, former gubernatorial candidate for New Jersey. So let's take a 10-minute break and then reconvene.
Thank you.